Observer Monday debrief with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Craig Nisbet, to look back at Hibs 4, Livingston 0 at Easter Road in the Scottish Premiership, back to winning ways for David Gray's side, and quite comprehensively so, against David Martindale's team. So we're going to have a look back over the game, pick out the key points, the key players and everything in between. But first of all, just as always, a quick word from our sponsor, the Hibs Observer, brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Edinburgh and the surrounding area, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs. So start your search today. Craig, thanks for joining us. As always, how are you and what do you think of Saturday's game?
Yeah, very good. I think, when we spoke before, we said what we'd like from, we would have taken a win regardless of the performance. And but I actually think we got a bit of both. We got a really good performance, probably some of our best football that we've played, some really good individual performances. And then, get it, it shouldn't make much of a difference when you win 1-0 or 2-0 or whatever. But I think just 4-0, I think it's felt like we needed to do that to a team at some point. It's just felt like we've always been on the cusp of that, with maybe putting away chances at the right times, and I think it all sort of came together for that on Saturday.
Yeah, as you said, it could have happened a few times so far this season, so I think it will be a good confidence boost, because it always just feels that bit better for players, fans, managers, just when it's got the scorelines, get that comprehensive feel to it, and kind of just shows that Hibs, again, like in a way that they've failed to do at times this season, that they are really capable of putting teams to the sword, and putting them away. Against Livingston, pretty kind of limited opposition, and we'll talk a wee bit about them in our analysis as well. But just to give you an idea, just where we can always tend to start with these, a kind of idea of how the game itself panned out. So if you're new to this basically brings in, just kind of plots the accumulation of expected goals against against the clock, really, against how the game plans out. And it's just basically XG it's just giving you an idea of the quality of chances that were created. And in this format, it gives you a real kind of clear view of how the sort of flow of the game, if you like, how and when chances were created, and it gives you, this one in particular gives you an idea that this is about as kind of as dominant as you can hope for in a game in the Scottish Premiership. If you could just look up towards the top left, it's based on the expected goals. It calculates, the win probability, based on the chances created. Hibs sitting there at 80%, draw 10%, and then Livingston giving just 2%. You can see this sort of one of the flat we see in a game involving Hibs this season. But it's, I feel like that is pretty much a fair reflection of how the game actually panned out, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously you can see we got a nice early goal, and then I'd say consistently just sort of built our way up through the game, decent chances, taking us into sort of half-time. Livingston not doing particularly much and making a few changes themselves, and then right after half-time, obviously I think it was 6 or 7 minutes when we got the penalty, and then obviously it grew from there, and obviously then we added the third and fourth towards the end of the game as well. So from these graphs that we've looked at before, this is almost perfect in terms of when to get goals. And I think that the game was never really in doubt, especially when it went 2-0.
No, it wasn't at all. That is what you want to see from a Hibs perspective. We'll just look here. David Gray made 3 changes to the team that lost to Hearts before the international break. So Thibault Klidje coming in. We'll talk about him plenty in due course. For Martin Boyle, Jamie McGrath was back in the side. He only played maybe 15 minutes or so against Hearts. And then you get Nicky Cadden coming back in on the left-hand side. So it was a more attacking lineup, I think. We've seen in the past couple of weeks, obviously going to Tynecastle and Celtic Park, and it's quite a satisfying looking passing network. It just kind of gives you an idea, again, if you've not seen these before, of the sort of average positions in which players picked up the ball, the lines between players. I'm sure you can guess, demonstrates passes. The thicker the line, the between players. So you can see a lot of good connections there across the pitch. Players pretty much where you would expect them to be. It's a kind of nice wee snapshot of the system there. So obviously, if you look into the midfield, you've got Dan Barlaser sitting at the base of that. Josh Mulligan, a wee bit more advanced. He plays more of a kind of box-to-box role, a kind of number 8, if you like. Jamie McGrath is the more advanced of the three. Nicky Cadden, as you would usually expect, the more advanced of the two wing backs, and then you've got your back three there, Warren O'Hora, Grant Hanley and Jack Iredale, which seems to be becoming quite a settled three at the moment. So it's a nice wee snapshot of how Hibs set up on the day, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, looking at that, you've got players spread out in good positions. You've got really, especially for that setup and the way we play, the fact that you've got, O'Hora and Iredale and lots of good connections with Nicky Cadden and Chris Cadden on either side's a real positive, because we do obviously rely on using the wing backs. That's the whole purpose of playing that. But it's also good as well to see Barlasser's sort of influence there as well, and even McGrath just being higher up. And in terms of having that sort of orange glow around him, showing that he was getting a bit more involved further up the pitch. It's interesting, both Bowie and Klidje not having as much on-ball value throughout the game, but I did actually think the moments they were getting on the ball, they were neat and tidy, and they did things really, really well. But yeah, very satisfying to look at. And as you said, you fans probably notice especially if you're at the games, like from goal kicks, we tend to push Nicky Cadden quite high up on that side, and Iredale sort of moves to like a left back and things like that as well. So there's these other little tweaks and things we're doing to try and get Nicky Cadden more advanced in the game. And certainly for that home game, it was the lineup that I think everybody wanted in terms of personnel, and it actually all came together really well as well.
Yeah. So first goal first goal at Easter Road for Thibault Klidje, and a man of the match award for him. We've been kind of on here the last few weeks, really just kind of, maybe clamouring for him to play is maybe a wee bit of an exaggeration, but just kind of wanting to see a bit more of what he's all about. David Gray has been, he's been pretty open and transparent about how he's, wanting to be careful with his development and just ensure that he's settled in properly before he throws him in. Because I think there is a certain pressure that comes with being, a £1 million plus player at a club like Hibs. It's a club rented fee. He's coming into a new environment, so I think you can understand the caution. But I think, on Saturday there, he very much looked like a player who's ready to make a proper impact, didn't he?
No, absolutely, and I think he brought everything to the team that we'd been lacking up top for a while. It's funny because I think Bowie was a lot quieter on Saturday, but I didn't particularly mind that because I think we were just able to use Klidje more at holding up the ball, and he was more available to feet, so we weren't having to rely on Bowie as much. And it'll take a bit of time for them to get a rhythm together as well. They had the odd little combination here and there, but even for Bowie's chance that he sort of controlled and volleyed first time just past the post in the first half, that all came from like a Klidje, like a well-timed Klidje run, that kind of stretched the defence, and then the ball was headed clear, and then Bowie's there to pick up the second ball. So it's things like that, listen, Boyle's capable of doing it, but at the start of the season anyways, he would often be caught offside, or he's always exclusively looking to run in behind, whereas I thought Klidje, he did run in behind a lot, but he also was able to come and drop deep and to get on the ball as well. And even for the goal, as you said, Barlasser has the ball and Klidje just sort of comes looking for it to feet. He has a lovely little turn past Silla, and he just takes like 3 really good touches, and the finish was sort of screamed off a striker, maybe frustrated at his lack of playing time, and just smashed it into the roof of the net. So listen, it was brilliant to see, because as I said, we've been asking for it for a lot. I think a lot of fans were at that point as well. And the one thing I would say about Gray, like, you're totally spot on with your assessment, and he obviously wants to give Klidje time and give him time to settle. And we've seen with like Dylan Vente, for example, when you rush somebody in and you maybe outplay them too much and the system doesn't fit, that you can just lose them and you end up having to move them on. So there's probably a little bit of that in David Gray's mind, but he's also very loyal as well, and I think if you think to like Smith, Rocky and Boyle, they're the 3 players, and Levitt, I suppose, as well, are the sort of 4 players that have kind of lost their place over the last couple of weeks. But those players during that 17 game stretch and that run were crucial. So I can kind of understand Gray maybe thinking, I'll persevere with them and I'll give them more time. And each couple of weeks has gone, you've seen one of them drop out and somebody else come in, and Boyle was, I suppose, the last one out of that 4 to go. But certainly Klidje came in and, probably had quite a lot of pressure on his shoulders, and it was a brilliant goal, but it was just great for him to get a goal and sort of probably settle those nerves. And it's his jersey to lose now, because I think he's got to be starting week in, week out now.
All right, okay, well, you've preempted. I was going to bring in a question here. Has Klidje earned the right to start against Aberdeen? He was such a good watch. So is that decision made already for you, not up for debate?
Yeah, I think so. I think he certainly brings a lot. I think his runs in behind were good. He's actually really good in the air as well. He's got a good leap on him, good aerial threat. And just those little runs in behind, like even for, the penalty, you can just see he just kind of peels off the defender late, just as the ball's moving. He times it really well, and that kind of makes the defenders, it was a poor decision, but makes the decision to kind of end up bringing them down. And I just think, as I've said, Boyle's capable of doing that, and we've seen him do that. But because teams are maybe a bit more aware of how we're going to play and what we're going to do, I think he just adds that, like, a freshness up front and something a little bit different, and nobody really knows him yet and knows his game, so he seems to have slotted in really, really well. And listen, if he goes off and goes on a run now and gets goals, then we'll be looking at David Gray and going, well, that was the right call. You've let him have time to embed, and these were the right decisions. But certainly going forward now, I think just because it took a bit of weight off Bowie, and because he popped up with a goal and was obviously won the penalty as well, and had other chances too, I think he has to start at the weekend.
Yeah, I think he certainly has earned it. I think listening to him, he did the post-match interview after the game, and he kind of sort of spoke about, he was sort of asked about having to wait a wee bit to play, and he himself seemed quite, I know he's not going to come out and slate David Gray and say, "Well, I should have been playing every week," but he seemed quite, almost reflected the tone of what the manager, as in, like, he was saying, I'm a new player, it's a new place for me, I'm adjusting to a new system, new teammates, and he sounded quite grateful for the help that he's received from everybody at the club to help him settle in over this period. So I mean, and you could there's he's talked about has at times been a wee bit of a language barrier when he's come over here, but I mean, his English was absolutely fine. To be honest, it looks like he's settling in well in that respect as well. So I mean, yeah, it certainly does now look like a player who's ready to make a significant impact on a consistent basis. And if he goes on and does that, then I think it will be a case of it'll be adjudged that David Gray's handled the situation pretty well, because I mean, he is the guy who sees these players every single day in training. It's obviously the longer somebody doesn't play, the more of a push there is inevitable. It happens kind of all the time. So I mean, yeah, was happy for him to kind of get off the mark at Easter Road in front of the home fans, get to experience that. And it was just a really, really good all-round performance from him. I thought, it's certainly one to build on. So if we move on towards the second half, Livy made some changes at half-time, but then it was Christian Montano, I believe, who came on at half-time and then gives away the penalty for the second goal.
Yeah, I mean, the first half was good. I thought we played really, really well. I thought Livy were poor. I think they must have made a concussion sub, I'm guessing, when Winter went off, because then they ended up making a few subs after that kind of confused a few people around us. So yeah, and obviously they had came and set up in the same shape, and I actually felt a couple of times they were able to sort of get round us or get in behind, and we were pretty good at blocking the crossing, maybe giving away a corner or whatever. But they certainly weren't out of it. And I think 1-0 at home, especially with the way we're playing and things like that, there is still a little bit of trepidation. So the second half was always going to be big. But yeah, I think they gambled and put Montano, and I think they put Tate came on as well, and then I think obviously Danny Wilson went off, who had kind of struggled a little bit, but then your back three was kind of a mix of, had Silla, they had I think Finlayson, who started at right wing back and came right centre back. So I don't know if he was trying to push to have sort of more attacking threats at centre half who could drive forward and maybe create maybe 2v1s down the wings. But certainly you could tell by the foul on Klidje, that's sort of like a fullback's foul, and I think he just gets caught wrong side and pulls him back in. Pardon?
You can get away with those out on the touchline to an extent.
Well, that's what we were saying. That's on the touchline. He's got space to run back in and defend. He's obviously got quite a good stretch and good run on him. And we've seen him in the past. If you run past him, he's got quite good recovery pace. But on that one there, he just gets totally wrong side. And obviously at that point, 2-0. It's a really good penalty from McGrath. Just very calm and casual. Puts it into the bottom corner. But I think at that point you could see, and obviously they'd kind of went for it there with Muirhead coming on as well and rolled the dice a little bit. But 2-0 just seemed to sink them then at that point. They just sort of seemed like their threat went. They made a couple of more changes, a couple of forced changes, I think, as well, with a couple of injuries. And they just said towards the end they were just all at sea, I thought. And certainly you would have probably had a better view than me, but Martindale certainly didn't look too happy on the touchline.
No, we are a fair bit away from him in the press box, but I think that much was certainly clear, and he wasn't too happy afterwards. I don't think in the post-match press conference, but he was complimentary of Hibs, to be fair. And he always goes into quite a lot of detail as to how he felt the game panned out. He was talking about Livingston's changes, why they did it. And there was a concussion sub for kind of avoidance of any doubt, because there was a bit of confusion about that. I think it was McLennan who was the concussion sub, so then he was. They were able to make not an extra one, but it doesn't count towards your overall quota of subs. So from then on, I mean, Hibs made a few changes themselves. Junior Hoylett coming off the bench to make a big impact.
Yeah, I mean they were sort of. I don't know if because of just how the season's panned out. I think like when that sub, especially for like we thought Klidje. Boyle would come on for Klidje. That was probably always going to happen around the 70th minute. But I was quite surprised that Bowie went off. I thought he would have stayed on. And obviously when Hoylett came on, I do think it's sort of for the first little while, I wasn't quite sure what the thought process was there. But then I think, like you said, Livingston they made another couple of changes as well around just before that. And I think we were able just to get ourselves back into the game. And listen, we were actually saying, sitting in the stand, we were like, Hoylett's had this season, I think he's had 3 or 4, maybe even 5, like big chances in games at quite crucial times. I remember a couple in Europe and certainly a few at the home games, and he's just not taken them. He's just like, he's missed the target, or he's like caught it too well, and all these different things. And we were saying, we could be sitting here with him having like 5 goals, but it's just not really been clicking. And then of course he pops up, he out jumps Silla for a Bowie-esque header in the opposite corner, and then I didn't see that coming, and it was a bit of like, you just got to trust David Gray, because he seems to, those subs that sometimes don't make sense, they seem to then just pan out for him. So but it does show, like it's good that Hoylett was able to put in. I'm glad he's been got off the mark goal scoring wise. I think that even though he's an experienced player, I think that'll still do his confidence a world of good. And like you say, if you've got a guy with experience like he does in and around the box, and you're able to get in, you will have faith that he'll put 1 or 2 away because of just his quality. But I didn't have it on the bingo card that he would come up with a header like that. But good time, and it covers a little bit of a crack that we don't have a big striker to come off the bench.
Yeah, maybe he is the target man.
That's it.
Everybody looking for, but he's a really good option in games like that where 2-0 up, the game's not over by any stretch, but you're in control of it. You're looking to kill it off where possible, but also somebody who can come on and slow it down where's needed as well. Just somebody with a bit of that know-how and experience, and he's still he's still got the touch, and maybe not the the legs that he would have had a good few years ago now, but his touch is still great. He knows the good positions to pick up. As I said, he's just got the sort of know-how of how to manage these situations when he comes onto the pitch. So it's it's good to see him still making an impact as well. And I thought the second goal was a brilliant finish, I thought. And then 2 assists for Chris Cadden on top of that as well. Yeah, no,
I was going to say that as well. I think that was his, it a brilliant second half for Chris Cadden, and I mean his cross for Hoylett's goal is brilliant. He just kind of gets it away from the other wing back, and it's a really good delivery. But yeah, even the second one as well, he puts in a decent ball. That I think it's for Boyle towards the back post that the sort of Livy defender has to defend. It comes straight back to him, and he shows a lot of composure and a really good bit of quality to sort of square it back into Hoylett's path. And again, it's another brilliant finish. And I suppose another advantage with Hoylett is that if Livingston pulled a goal back and it went 2-1, you've got someone that can kind of go and tuck into midfield and make things a bit tighter and stuff like that as well. So you do kind of get that extra role that he can possibly play there as well. But in terms of that off the bench, you can't ask for any more of an impact, really.
Aye, it was good. It was good to see that from Junior Hoylett. So just before we wrap up, we reintroduced the tactics boards section of the show last week, and we're going to do so again here just to finish things off. Don't worry, Craig hasn't done a runner. He's just performing the same magic trick that he did last week. See, there we go. There it is. Because you wanted to kind of highlight just a couple of points about the midfield setup before we finish up today. Yeah, it's just the last thing, and as obviously we've seen with McGrath's positioning that he almost in the graph we showed that it's almost like Klidje and Bowie were sort of like over here together, and McGrath was positioned here. I think like the one thing that I thought was evident throughout the game, like Livy sort of set up in the same shape. It was they slightly changed their front players around a little bit as the game went on, but what I thought was interesting is I thought if you take Mulligan and Barlaser there, because it was more those two, I actually thought Barlaser looked more comfortable when he was sort of a free player as a 6 and McGrath tucked back in here. And it just meant as the ball works wide to say outside to one of the right centre backs, we probably wouldn't want Klidje and Bowie constantly chasing that, especially up at the top end of the pitch. So at that point here, you might then see McGrath coming off and Barlaser then stepping up and covering in those positions, or maybe tracking that runner. And I thought he looked quite comfortable doing that. He seemed to communicate that quite well. And even if there was maybe no real threat, or let's just say Klidje had ran back, he was actually pretty good at just sliding across and screening and stopping passes in. Where I still kind of thought he struggled a bit is if McGrath had, say, stayed out on this left-hand side and you've got Bowie and, say, Klidje here, when he was in these positions here and having to always track a runner, that's where I kind of thought he struggled a little bit. And even in the transitions, like if Iredale wins it and he picks it up back, when he was under a lot of pressure, again, I still thought he kind of struggled. That when the game's quick around him, I didn't think he quite had it. He got dispossessed quite a few times. And I think it looked like in the first half especially, we changed a couple of times where McGrath sometimes tucked back in here and he was like a number 10. Then there was times he sort of tucked into here and made it more like a 3 and Barlaser was spare. And I suppose it's a very small thing to highlight and it might not have too much significance going forward, but I think like better teams probably pick up that and maybe play through us a lot quicker and makes that midfield run across a bit more challenging. And like I say, if that's out to here, for example, and we're not getting players back, it is quite a big run for like your central midfielder to come across, because obviously Livy had played with wing backs, they played with a front 3, so our defenders were kind of pinned all the way through. So the battle really was kind of in the middle of the park. And I do think that we maybe in certain games maybe have to ask McGrath to play in that sort of deeper position and be almost to play alongside Josh Mulligan. But in these home games where you might have a bit more of the ball and a bit more advantage, you can maybe have a bit more of a freer role. But it's maybe something to keep a wee eye on going forward in the future. Yeah, certainly something I think worth highlighting, because we have spoken before, and I think we did last week about Hibs being a bit easier, if that's the right word, for opposition teams to play through at points this season. So I mean, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on going forward, especially as you say, against teams who have got a bit more quality, a bit more intent and the capability to hurt you those areas. Yeah. So yeah, I think we'll maybe wrap up now, folks, unless you've got, if I've anything else to add.
No, I think it's just something to keep an eye on. No, it's fine. I think just, if Chaiwo obviously came back off the bench, and I suppose after Chris Cadden's 2 assists, you'll imagine that he'll keep his place. I would imagine it'll be the same team. I know McGrath went off, so hopefully he can recover in time. But, if McGrath wasn't to play, I think it's an interesting question who comes into that role, because it could be a Hoylett, but he's not going to be able to do that running back like McGrath can do. And we spoke before, then you maybe think of Josh Campbell because he can do the running, but then you lose the sort of attacking threat that McGrath does because he picks up great positions in terms of his footwork and things like that. So I think for Sunday, if McGrath's not fit, keep a wee eye on that central midfield and see how the dynamics change.
Absolutely. For joining us, I do apologise if you've had any technical issues with us live today. The issues are, if you've had them, they are at our end. We had the same ones after the game at the weekend. We're sorry about that. I think the audio was affected, and apologies if you've had any issues today. We're going to have a look into that and see if we can make sure we sort it out going forward. So if you have had issues, that it's not interrupted your enjoyment at the show of a very good Hibs win, and a much needed one heading into a couple of tough games, away up to Aberdeen, and then a few days later Rangers coming to Easter Road. So a big week ahead again, aren't they all, in the Scottish Premiership. So thank you folks for joining us. Thanks to Craig for joining us, and as always for his great insight into the weekend's game. We'll be back over the next few days, building into the Aberdeen game. We've got some good content going on the hibsobserver.co.uk website as well. A look inside the new visitor centre at Easter Road, an in-depth feature with East Kilbride in League 2, who Hibs obviously have a cooperation loans partnership with. So do keep an eye out for those, as well as our usual build into the weekend's game. So thank you very much again. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll speak to you soon. Cheers.